But if you're looking for something to control and to have some actual things that you can do to increase your wealth, then real estate is really the way to go. But it's a long-term play, and that's all rentals are for us. It's the long term. And I think the best way to mitigate that fear is through your own education. So I did it with books and podcasts and things. But now I encourage people to go to their RIAs and talk to other investors.
We were in negotiations.
Investing in real estate, they're winning, they're making money.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Real Estate Educators Podcast, where we provide the education you can build on. I am your host, Kevin Amolsch. This podcast has been so much fun. I'm loving it. We're helping real estate investors and real estate educators. So you're out there buying properties, building a rental portfolio. Maybe you're fixing and flipping, or are you educating investors and trying to generate some business through content creation? This is the podcast for you. I have a super cool special guest with me today, Mr. Billy Daniel. Now, Billy's been investing in real estate for about 8 years, and now he's a real estate agent, owns his own brokerage in Arkansas. So he really has a specialty, a niche for helping agents with their training and helping real estate investors, newer real estate investors get going. So excited to have this conversation with Billy today. If he's not doing real estate, which is his passion, he's on the deck with a cigar, he says. So Billy, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, Kevin, thanks for having me. This has been great.
Cool. Yeah, you just said that you booked this podcast with me while you were in your car in a traffic jam. So you must be pretty busy, huh?
Yeah, we're actually spring break for us was last week. We were driving back home and we were just on the interstate. I guess there was a wreck or something. We never saw it. I was just sitting there. I was like, well, I'll check my emails real quick while I'm in park here. And sure enough, there it was. Like, hey, let's do it.
Let's do it. So very efficient. Well, take me back. So it's been 8 years since you've been in the business, and I love how you were an investor first and then became a broker second. So obviously you felt the getting that license would help you probably in your investing and your overall career. But let's talk about the investing side first. So 8 years ago, tell me what happened. Why did you get involved?
I had wanted to be investing in real estate for a while, and I always had this strong draw towards it for the freedom it gave you and the control you had over your own investments. I tell people now, you can go put money in Google or whoever you want, and then you just kind of got to sit back and hope that they do well. Like there's really nothing else you can do. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, but if you're looking for something to control and to have some actual things that you can do to increase your wealth, then real estate is really the way to go. And that's always been the big draw for me. And so 2018 kind of rolled around. My wife and I, we've been talking about it for a while. I had just read Rich Dad Poor Dad, so I had that, I had the fire lit under me. And she was an agent at the time, and she found this house on the market for, I think it was listed at $20,000, 3-bed, 2-bath, about 1,400 square feet. So it looked like a property that size, that cheap. We ended up getting it for 15, so we didn't have to pay full price for it.
Oh, nice.
But it was just a complete. I mean, everything had to be done. I mean, we kept about half the studs. I think that was about it. But everything had to be done. It was a massive first project, and I make the joke now when I'm talking to people. I was like, whenever we were done renovating that house, I remember telling my wife, like, we're never doing this again. Like we are done. Real estate was a terrible idea. I'm never doing it. And here we are 8 years later, several more properties, both fully engaged in the real estate business. So it was a huge learning experience. But man, once I got that first rent check coming in, I was like, you know what, maybe we could stick around and keep doing this for a while.
I was going to ask you what you did, what your exit strategy on that first deal was. So you still own that one today, huh?
Still own it today. We put it on the market as soon as we were done, and we only had it up for about 30 days. And we're just kind of like, you know what, let's just rent it and see what happens. And we got a tenant pretty much immediately. And like I said, that rent check came in, and that is one of our best performing properties to this day. It's been great, because we had to redo everything. There's not a whole lot of expenses. So everything's brand new, but man, it's just, we look back on that now, like I'm so glad that we just dove in and tackled this huge project right off the bat because it's all been easy since then. Honestly, it's just,
Really?
well, easy. I should say easier. I shouldn't say easy. But it's all been easier since that massive learning experience.
That's interesting. Yeah, most people do not share their real estate journey as easy. Rewarding, worth it, yes.
Yeah.
Financial freedom, yes. All of that's true, but it's a difficult path.
Mhm.
I don't typically do this. What I really like to focus on extracting like nuggets of information and advice and that sort of thing. But I'm very curious now because of how you went to flip, then you decided to fall back to a plan B and keep it, and you still have it 8 years later. You told me it's your best performing asset. So let's go through the numbers here. You said you bought it for 15. What was the rehab on it?
So we purchase price was 15. Rehab came out to just over 50.
Oh, that's
So
a
we
big
were
one. Yeah.
all in at about 65. We were all in. We had an ARV at the time of about 80, somewhere around 80, if I remember correctly. Uh, we were able to get this, pre-COVID. So I want to say we were like a 4.1 or 4.5 interest rate, something like that. So it cash flowed about, I want to say it was just over $100 a month when we got our first tenant. Um, the reason we decided not to flip it and just to hang on to it was really because we didn't get that big, rush of new buyers coming into it as soon as we put it on the market. So that was kind of disappointing. And we kind of wanted to go the long-term rental route anyway, but that just kind of helped reinforce us and made our mind up for us. Uh, so it cash flowed around $100 a month when we first got it. Now it's closer to $500 a month. But we've continued to put money into it and improve its value. Right now, I think we could sell it for around 140, um, which is not too bad considering it's double our money on it.
Yeah.
Just our initial investment, not accounting all the cash flow we've had pretty much every month. I think we've had about 3 months total of vacancy since we've owned it, or
Wow.
eight
So
years.
you tell me 15 grand and you said 50 grand. I was like, whoa, that is a big rehab. So let me preface this for the listener. That was a big rehab
Yeah.
in 2018. 50 grand doesn't get you as far today.
Right.
But so that was probably a pretty major project, I can imagine. Yeah, 50s plus 15, so you're 65 with an ARV of 80. Yeah, that has rental written all over it. I mean,
Yeah.
you can't make money flipping that thing, right? After cost to
Right.
acquire, holding costs and all that, you'd be upside down. So you had to hold it. What does it rent for now?
I believe we have our tenant in there now. I use a property manager because I like to be kind of hands off. But I believe we're renting at about 1,200 a month.
Oh yeah. So we as investors, we've always been told the 1% rule, right, Billy? If you could buy a
Mhm.
property and rent it for 1% a month of what you're paying for it, then you're doing pretty well. You're pretty darn close. If the value is accurate at the 140, you're pretty close to that 1% rule on a single family detached house.
Yes, and that in our area in our market, that's really where a lot of single family homes fall if you're looking to get them for rental. I mean, they're not quite that 1% rule, but they're just slightly below it, and that's fairly standard for our area. That you can get lucky and find some that meet that rule completely. But for where you are, you can get pretty close and
That's pretty
be
close.
pretty happy with it. Yeah.
And my guess is that's 140 fully stabilized, fully remodeled, right? So
Yes, that's right.
if you're finding discounted properties, like you said earlier about control, you can force appreciation up to that. So your actual basis is probably not that hard to get the 1%. Where is this at? Should I not say this out loud to record it?
I'm really not sure about that.
We don't have to do that. It's in Arkansas, I assume.
It is in Arkansas. Yeah, it's here local in Russellville, where we live.
Okay, good. Yeah. Now, I'm a big proponent of investing in your own backyard. So I'm not telling the listener to go like ransack your backyard there, but um it's not so easy to find that type of cash flow in Denver, where I'm from.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. In a lot of places, it is tough. I've listened to several podcasts and keep up with a lot of current events. Obviously, the nature of my job, but I know it's been hard for investors the last couple of years. But we're commercial rates that now we use commercial loans on all of ours, so they're starting to trickle down a little bit. So I'm hoping that kind of starts bringing some investors back into the market and making cash flow a little easier to come by. I know it's been really hard the last couple of years unless you just have a massive down payment to go with it.
Right. That's exactly right. So I'm curious now. You mentioned commercial loan. So for the listener, tell me the difference. Why would you go commercial loan? What is it? Why would you go that direction instead of a Fannie Freddie type product?
Sure. So, your typical mortgage, like you said, Fannie Freddie, your FHA, USDA, those types of loans are all going to be considered secondary market loans. So what that means is you may go to your local bank and fill out the application and work with that loan officer through your transaction. But most of the time with those loans, as soon as you close, they put those up on the market and they sell them to someone else, and then those go and be serviced by that buyer from the bank. Uh, what that means is that there's more of an expectation and more of a standard that a house and a borrower have to meet in order to fit in that box where that bank can go and sell that loan. So there's a little more stringent requirements. We could have never bought our $15,000 house with a mortgage. It just would not qualify for anything. With our commercial loan or our in-house loan, as some people call them, that's much simpler to get in most cases. I like to tell people it's more of that old school banking. You go in, you talk to a commercial loan officer, you shake hands, and you all discuss your plans. He kind of goes over your finances, and it's really up to that commercial loan officer, based on the amount of your loan, whether or not you get it. But there's things you can do. So, for instance, with our whenever we buy a property like that needs a massive rehab, the great thing about our loans are you can, let's say, a $15,000 house. I'm going to pay my 20% down payment, which is only $3,000. But then they're going to let me draw my loan all the way up to 80% of my ARV. So I can do the whole rehab on the bank's dime, essentially, and then have $100,000 property that I've only spent $3,000 on. So if you kind of pay attention to your numbers and you do the front end due diligence right, you could really come out way ahead with very little money down by doing these commercial loans. And they don't have to meet all those requirements as far as a house, obviously, because our house had a hole all the way through it. So
Yeah, that's interesting. I love how you're describing this. So the Fannie Freddie has a strict underwriting box, and habitability is one of the key words that we hear in lending.
that's right.
And if there's a house that's 15 grand that needs 50 in rehab, that one might not be habitable.
That's right.
So that you wouldn't be able to go the conventional route. Now, with that said, when you can qualify for the conventional loans, your 30-year fixed rate loans, that's going to be the cheapest, best money you can get. So on the commercial loans, talk to me about the terms. Are you getting 30-year fixed rate loans on these commercial loans?
So we're getting, excuse me, amortized over 20 years with a 5-year balloon most of the time. You could do, or with our lenders that we work with, they all have a 3, 4, or 5-year balloon, and your rates will vary based on which choice you're. But all of them are amortized over 20 years. I do know one loan officer that'll amortize over 25 years, depending on the loan amount and things like that. But the commercial loans are very different, or I should say, are much more different bank to bank than what your primary mortgages are going to be.
Yeah, and we oftentimes you'll hear that in this industry as portfolio loans or portfolio lending. So you called it in-house, same thing. So talk to me about the amortization. What is that? How does that, if it goes from a 30-year to a 20-year, what's that going to do?
You know, I remember going down this path whenever there was a lot of talk about 40-year mortgages
Yeah.
last year, I think it was, and whenever you plug the numbers in and you're looking at 30-year versus 40-year or 30-year versus 20-year, you're not going to see a huge difference in your monthly payments, in my opinion. Now, it may be just enough that you need for your cash flow goal, but you're not going to see as much of a dent as you would maybe initially think you would, going from a 30-year to a 20-year or 40-year, whatever it is. Now, your rate changes, on the other hand, those will affect those payments much more for a much smaller change. A 0.5% interest rate will be a much larger change, I think, than a 10-year amortization period, based on your amount.
Yeah. So I think you're right. And I would just challenge a little here, Billy, because it depends on the size of the loan.
Yeah.
10-year difference in amortization, that's a 30%, 33% difference to the 30-year fixed. If we're looking at $500,000 houses like we are here and in Minneapolis, where I also do a lot of business, that is going to have a pretty significant
Yeah.
impact.
Yeah.
So for the listener, a shorter the amortization, the faster you pay off the loan, which means the higher the monthly payment. And then the 3, 4, 5-year maturities, all that's doing is shifting interest rate risk from the bank to you. So if interest rates go up and the 5 years comes up, well, now you got to refinance at the higher rate. So it's not locking the bank into these low interest rate loans forever, like Fannie and Freddie could do, because, well, they're controlled by the government. Anything
Right.
else you'd like to add to that?
No, I think that's a great point you bring up. Here in our market, our average home price is about $180,000. So, you're absolutely right. Where your price point matters a lot when you're talking about the changes to your mortgage terms.
Yeah, and they're not doing 40-year loans, Billy, for your benefit. Trust me.
No, they're
That's
not.
for
That's all right.
California and New York and some of those others. Okay, so let's go, and 2 years later, so you start buying properties. Yep, 2 years later, you go into the real estate agent world. I want to know about the transition, but I want to know why you made the decision first.
No, so I had mentioned she was an agent before, and she had always wanted to have her own brokerage. She wanted a place where she could help agents come in and really grow their own businesses and be super successful. Have, like, it goes back to that control. A real estate agent is almost like the epitome of having control over your own destiny. It's all up to you. So she wanted to build a place where she could help more and more people do that. So we kind of went down that route. Um, and then I decided I wanted to get my license, A, so I could help out when I needed to, but B, so that whenever properties came up on the market, I didn't have to wait, for anyone else, so I could go look at it, or I can, start talking to people about it. So by me having my own license, if I'm looking at the hot sheet in the morning and something hit the market 15 minutes ago, I can I can ask to go see it right away. I can reach out to the other agent. I have all the information I need right there at my fingertips, and I don't have to wait and ask for permission from anybody else. I can just do it. So that was a big reason for me to get my license. And then naturally that just spilled over into helping other investors, just trying to target the investing niche and helping them get into houses and understanding the risk and everything, because I really believe there's a lot of power in real estate when it comes to setting you up for financial freedom in the future. So I wanted to take a very direct and approach into helping other people kind of realize that dream
And get it paid doing it.
and get paid doing it. That's right.
Yeah. So the one thing that I find interesting about business, especially the real estate business, is you could be profitable and go out of business. And real estate is specifically vulnerable to that, if that's the right way to say that, because of the way amortizations work. So when you make your payment every month to your bank, only a portion of that's interest expense, right? The rest of it's profit, but it doesn't go in your pocket, right? It goes to reduce the principal of the loan. So it could be profitable and negative cash flow, right? So cash flow is vital to longevity. And you've been in business for 8 years, so you understand this. Creating that extra stream of income being an agent probably helps you with your real estate investing.
That's right. Yeah, it's just one more way to, like you said, for real estate investing, your biggest, at least my biggest expense is vacancy.
Yeah.
It's, a property goes vacant, well, your other ones can float it, but if you have two or three, or a growing percentage of your properties are vacant at a time, well, all of a sudden you're kind of out of luck. You got to really either market that property, or you got to have something else to come in and help cover those payments and those bills while those are empty. But real estate has been great for us to have that extra stream of income. What's the saying? An average millionaire has 7 streams of income or something like that. I don't even know if that's
Oh, I
true,
haven't heard that. That's
but
interesting.
but it sounds like it could be true. I mean, because that's kind of where we're at. Is our investment properties, they sit over here in this little bucket, and they pay for themselves, and they pay for their own upgrades and that forced appreciation. They all take care of that themselves. But and then the real estate business stays over here in this bucket, and this is how we pay our mortgage and buy our groceries. But we do well enough over here, we can send some over here whenever it needs to be, or vice versa. So having those multiple streams of income has helped us out a lot. Not to mention just the network, that being full time in real estate all the time, that we've been able to develop just through connections and everyday business now, as opposed to just every now and then an investment property when we needed somebody.
Probably some of your best friends were made from this business, weren't they?
That's right. That's not far from the truth.
Yeah. Yeah, I think most people experience that when you, especially when you start having success, your friend group, it has to change. It just does. And then you're surrounding
Absolutely.
yourself with people that are like-minded. So I assume probably real estate investors.
That's right. Yeah. Or
And so,
that same kind of growth, rich dad, poor dad mindset. You know,
yeah,
that's really the key, I think. Man, not necessarily real estate, but I mean, that's just by our nature, that's how it ends up being for us.
yep. And it's actually sometimes very difficult because you're spending less time with people you really care about and love, right? But it's just your time's finite. And these people over here are helping push me towards my goals, and you're not. So that's those are
Yeah.
sometimes challenging choices. But I want to get back to
Yeah.
this cash flow for just a quick second. So a lot of our clients will fix and flip, and they use that to pay the bills and then acquire rentals, because there's two different things we're looking at here, right? You need your cash flow to live, but you want your long-term wealth, which is what rental properties create. What's your experience with rental properties creating enough cash flow to live on? Because I hear people all the time, I'm just going to buy a bunch of rentals and live on that.
Uh, I would say that is a great long-term plan. I don't think, you're going to buy a rental property and then just be able to quit your job anytime soon. I think there are people out there who will make you think that you could buy a couple of houses and all of a sudden you're set for life. And it's just not true in my experience. It takes years to build up and you got to get multiple properties and you can't just go in and get $1,000 cash flow on day one unless you're a whiz with at least with a single family home. But it's a long term play, and that's all rentals are for us. It's the long term wealth. We take some money out of our properties every now and then for our personal needs or wants or whatever, but for the most part we're taking most of that money and just reinvesting it back in the properties and continuing to raise their value, so that someday in the future we decide we want to sell one. Well, now we get a big payday, we can 1031. It's something that does provide enough money, enough cash flow for us to kind of start living off of the rental properties. But that's a year's game, not a month's game.
Yeah, I love what you're saying here. And you've been doing this for a while, so you understand this. But let me just ask this question. Are you happy you kept that very first one?
I am.
Look what you've done with yourself.
It
I mean, look at
it
that. It's amazing, isn't it?
yeah, it's just, I always remind people, like, I swore it off. Like, there was nothing at that time that was going to convince me that I was ever going to buy another investment property again in my life. And we have since bought at least two more houses that required that same extensive uh, amount of rehab, and we have all of them, and it's great, man. It's just, but once that first step, that first little chunk right there is the hardest by far. We'll tell people, I don't know anybody who owns one rental property. You buy one and you either hate it and get out of it,
Yeah.
or you get bit by the bug and you're getting the second, third, fifth, whatever one after that. So very few people own one rental property. Those are just the people in transition.
Yeah, the landlord by default or something. I
Yeah,
haven't
that's
thought
right.
about that, but you are right. I'm trying to think if I know anyone that owns just one, and I don't. At least it's not coming to mind. So that's
Yeah.
interesting. This episode is brought to you by Pine Financial Group. Pine Financial is a private lender specializing in short-term rehab lending to real estate investors. Got a property that needs some love? We can help. We are able to offer funding solutions because we raise private money from individual investors. With more than 15 years of experience, Pine offers passive investors an alternative that provides stability, consistency, and security to your portfolio. If you like real estate but want to avoid the ups and downs and effort, a Pine mortgage fund could be a perfect fit for you. Accredited investors will experience an 8% preferred return and profit sharing. Diversify your portfolio out of Wall Street and into Main Street with a Pine Financial Group mortgage fund. Get more information at pinefinancialgroup.com. That's pinefinancialgroup.com. So I know you love working with new real estate investors, especially first-time investors. So I want to get into some of that, how you help them, what they should be looking for, what they should be watching out for. But for you, you got going A lot of people don't, right? They listen to podcasts like the Real Estate Educators and they don't actually go implement. So that taking that action is very difficult. How did you overcome the fear to buy that very first one?
For me personally, I spent a lot of time in the analysis paralysis. I mentioned I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and that kind of got my fire lit. And I was like, all right, well, I'm gonna go. I got a couple of real estate investing books after that, read up on it, and I learned how to analyze properties. So every day I was logging on to Zillow or MLS or whatever, and I was analyzing just property after property after property. And finally, I was just to the point like I'm just tired of working out of books and notepads. Like, let's just go do it. Let's go bite the bullet. Let's go buy this property. The worst thing that happens is we end up owning a property that's not worth a lot of money. We sell it. We take our loss. It's going to be cheaper than going to college. No, it's the price of an education. It's fine. It'll be fine. We're not going to end up, having to sell everything we own. I think it was just that thought process of, well, what's the worst that could really happen? It's easy for us, I think for all people, to just think about, well, I'm going to put some money in this house and it's not going to work out. And then next thing you know, I'm going to be living in my car. Well, sure, that could happen, but is that probably going to happen? No. You're probably not going to be that bad. At the end, you're still going to own the property. It has some value, so and just realizing, taking a realistic look on what the worst that can happen. You should always be conservative. You should always kind of err on the cautious side, but realize that you can be too cautious, and that just put handcuffs on you, and you're never going to get very far with that kind of mindset. So overcome that fear, and realize that yeah, it could be a bad investment, but whenever I get to the other side of this bad investment, I'm going to be way smarter than I am now, and I'm probably not going to make the same mistakes again. So that's the first step, I think,
And you
just
could
realizing that.
work with a great broker or work with a good
Mhm.
mentor or someone to help, I guess at least mitigate that.
Yeah, and whenever I started, it was all books and internet and me sitting on the couch doing it all by myself. Now I tell people, find a RIA, find your real estate investor association, talk to brokers, talk to loan officers, go in and just tell them, hey, I really want to invest in real estate. What do you think I need to be thinking about? And I believe in the real estate investor associations, the RIA, so much that I started ours here in our community.
Oh, okay.
I've been going. It'll be 2 years next month, 2 years, and it's been great. And it's just such a valuable resource. When I have somebody who's like, "Hey, I'm really thinking about buying an investment property," it's like, "Well, our meeting is next Thursday. Come to our meeting. It's free to get in. I got construction guys, I got loan officers, I got realtors, I got everybody you could want to talk to about investment properties, and most of them, I should say, own properties, so they understand what you're going through. Like, come in and talk to people and get all those answers and get your fears worked out, and you'll be set. You'll be ready to go.
Cool. You didn't mention your RIA to me. I didn't know that you were doing that. Tell us a little more
It's
about that. Like,
yeah.
what's the name of it? How do we find it? Like,
It's
tell
the
me about it.
River Valley Real Estate Roundtable. It's a mouthful, but I didn't want it to just be Investor Association, so I wanted something that sounded kind of catchy, so I went Real Estate Roundtable.
Nice.
But it was for that reason. It was because when I got started, I didn't have a network or anybody that I could really talk to. The nearest RIA from me at the time was in Little Rock, which is a little over an hour away, and that's just I wasn't ready to commit that much to go meet with them. So I started one here and just invited my network, which I had grown, after investing for a few years and being an agent and things, and people show up, and it's just been great. It is one of my most favorite things that I do is that monthly meeting for an hour and a half or whatever it is, and we just hang out, have a couple of drinks, and just talk about real estate, and it's great.
Do you guys have like speakers every month or?
Yeah, so I put together like a little presentation, and our first part we kind of talk about wins. We're real big on talking about what are your wins? You buy a property, did you get rid of a bad tenant? Whatever your wins are. Then we talk about our market updates. So I talk about their local residential real estate market and how it's going to be. And then I like to bring in local speakers, so attorneys, loan officers, insurance guys, home inspectors. I like to bring in local people to come in and talk and just make sure that our group is just a group of very smart and wise investors. So I try to make it very well rounded as much as I can.
That's amazing. So it's not part of the national RIA, I assume.
No, we're not part of the national. It's just this thing that I
Just you
wanted to
guys.
do, so I just did it.
I have a very similar experience. We called it the happy hour, because we would do something very similar to what you're doing, and it was all local. Nobody could sell anything. We didn't allow that. And it was free. Like sounds like yours is totally free as well.
We charge a like a $15 a person, but your first meeting is free, so you
First
get
is
like your
free.
little sampler to come in.
Okay,
But that's
gotcha.
just really just to help with the venue we have it at and things like that. And then every now and then I like to try and bring in an outside speaker who maybe, one of those people who owns a bunch of properties or has decades of experience. Try to bring in somebody like that.
Got it.
Then that usually costs, hotel and things like that.
Got it. So you got to pay for all of that stuff. I'm with you, man. That was one of my favorite nights of the month when we did our meeting. Just everyone getting together. You see the same faces over and over. You build the friendships like we talked about. You do business with each other. I
Yeah.
really enjoyed it. So how many people are you getting to one of these meetings, you say?
Our largest one, I think we had 19. For the most part, we averaged anywhere from 10 to 15
So it's small.
people.
Perfect.
So
It's like a little
yeah,
mastermind almost.
it is. Yeah. And most of those, there's about 8 people who show up to every meeting. And we usually have a couple new people or a couple people who make it once every 3 or 4 months. Um, but it's a really good group, very supportive group. They like to somebody will broadcast a problem, and then you get 4 or 5 people like, hey, talk to me afterwards. I know what you need to do, or I got some help for you. It's just great, and I love it.
And I know you specialize in working with investors and specifically newer investors. So I'm assuming you're inviting your clients in constantly and hoping they show up.
Absolutely. Everyone who tells me that they either want an investment property or they if the words investment property or rental come out of their mouth, I usually invite them. That's about where my baseline is.
Okay. Now, I'm not a huge proponent of this. Like I mentioned, I think people should invest in their own backyard when they're getting started. But it is hard to get cash flow in some parts of the country. So we are looking for cash flow type markets like apparently you're in. So if somebody was interested in buying something in your backyard, would you be an agent to help them, or how would that work?
Yeah, we've helped people from outside of Arkansas, come in and help buy stuff here in our local area. Um, I don't like to travel too far outside of our area just because I'm not a specialist in those markets. But here in our local area, we do have a large university and pretty stable economy. We don't get the same highs that most markets get, but we also don't get the same lows that they get. So we're fairly stable as far as the real estate market is concerned. But we'll get people all the time, especially California. Californians will call us and, hey, I'm looking to buy an investment property. I've got $9 million cash because I just sold my shed or something. Uh,
Exactly.
and then they're we'll help them find a property to get into.
Nice. And do you help them with property management at all? Or if I was going to buy a property in your town with you, how would that work?
So we would do a consult, probably virtually, and then get you under contract. And in Arkansas, from the day you go under contract, you've got 10 business days to do your property inspection, your due diligence. And we always encourage our out of area buyers to make the trip during that window, preferably when the home inspector is going to be doing the home inspection. Lay eyes on it yourself, because what I think is a good deal, you may not think is a good deal, and vice versa. Even, no matter what the paper says, you just need to. There's nothing beats laying your own eyes on your property before you dump a bunch of money into it. But once we get to closing, we help our people with everything. We don't do the property management ourselves, but we do have obviously connections with local property managers, and some of them will even give our clients a bit of a cut on their monthly fees. So we are full service in the fact that we have everything you need, and we'll help you get in contact and make those connections and introduce whoever to the property and meet them there. We'll do all that stuff. But property management is just not something that I enjoy at all. I did it for a
Yeah.
while, and I was like, this is not the path for me.
I kind of figured that because you said you outsource all your property management. So I was assuming you were not a manager, but you could definitely help
Yeah,
someone with that.
Yeah, I could get you set up with a good property manager who communicates and who takes care of your properties and actually does the inspections and sends you proof that they did them. I can get you set up with that, but I'm not going to do that myself. It's
Yeah,
just not for me.
I hear you. All right, I want to get into some more last final pieces of advice for new real estate investors. But before that, I know you have a training that you're doing with the help brokers or something. I don't know that much about it. Can you just quickly describe what that is?
Sure. So we launched EBI training and development last month, I believe. It's trainwithebi.com. And what it is we created these presentations that are intended to be taught by either brokers or office leaders, training manager type people within a real estate brokerage. So these are presentations covering a wide array of topics that real estate agents need training on. And it's not just prospecting and writing contracts, but it also goes into things like financial planning and budgeting and things that agents need to learn about just to have a well-rounded business. It's not all about just producing more income. It's also making sure that when you get that income, you're being smart with it. So we call it the business improvement training, and it's all about agents treating their business like a business and allowing them to grow or giving them foundational knowledge so they can grow and reach the next level and reach their goals in their career. So we launched that, and we're real excited about it. We think it's a pretty unique concept. Um, but it's not intended for like a real estate agent to go out and just download this presentation and self-study. There could be some value gain, but honestly, it needs to be led by somebody who can provide some of their own personal stories, who can verify the market accuracy for whatever state they're in, which they should all be fairly neutral as far as state laws are concerned. But it's intended for a broker to be able to spend more time working on their business so they don't have to do things like plan training and then create a training presentation and then implement the training. They can just download it and implement it. Now they're freed up to help do other things to help grow their business.
You know what I find interesting about that, Billy? I think that there's an absolute need, and you're right, there's a little niche here. The problem, agents don't know that they need this help. Like,
Yeah.
I'm sure you're running into this, but agents think that they can manage their own money and they don't need help with the business side and the operation side. What they need is more deals, right? So all they want to do is go train on how to find deals.
Right.
I can imagine it's a bit of an uphill battle for you to find clients for this. But you're right. This is absolutely what they should be doing, in my opinion.
Yeah, and there's agents, that we kind of call it our unpopular opinion. You can fire your clients as an agent. Like if your client's not working out, you can fire a client. You may lose that deal, but maybe you gain the free time now to go find three other clients who are great to work with. But if you have your finances under control and you have a budget and you're following it, now you probably realize you don't need as many deals. Maybe you don't have to miss soccer practice on Tuesdays now because you can go ahead and reschedule that client for another day. You don't feel that pressure anymore. So I think it's real estate agents are very focused on that top line income and they want to grow that top line income, but then they just kind of forget about everything that's underneath that top line. And that's what we're really trying to help them turn around. And yeah, it is an uphill battle, but we're going to fight it.
Yeah, you should. I think it's a fantastic approach. I hope you're successful with it. The agents, if you guys are listening, man, this is a business. This is a business, and you need to operate it like that. And they don't teach you that in real estate school. I mean, there's a lot to being successful that they don't teach you in real estate school. You have to go somewhere else to find that information. And yeah, operations and systems and scaling and then cash flow management, all of that is vital to success.
Yeah, you got to track your numbers.
Track your numbers. Yeah, you even said earlier your know your numbers on the front end helps you with your buying the properties with little money down. So you're big on the numbers, I could tell. So help me out with help me out with new real estate investors. So if I'm a new real estate investor, give me a couple of pieces of advice here.
Yeah, first is, the fear that is inevitably going to be there whenever you buy your first deal. It's the fear of the unknown, really is all it is. You've never done this before, it's something new, and it's going to cost you a few $1,000s, several $1,000s maybe. So there's a lot of fear there. And I think the best way to mitigate that fear is through your own education. So I did it with books and podcasts and things. But now I encourage people to go to their RIAs and talk to other investors, reach out and develop a network, because even with books and internet and things like that, those are all kind of market specific. Real estate's hyper local, so the people who are going to help you the most are the ones that are right in your backyard, and they want to. I have yet to meet an investor who was like, "Oh, I'm not telling you my secrets. I'm not gonna. We're not. I'm not gonna tell you that." Very open community for the most part. Uh, so just kind of getting over that fear of the unknown. I realize that it's perfectly natural. Everybody feels the same way. Even now, when I buy a property, there's always a period while it's under contract. I'm like, oh, this is a bad idea. I'm making a big mistake with this one, and they all work out. So just realize that's part of the
Interesting.
process. You're going to go through that, and that's okay. Just get through it.
Yeah, you said something that is making me think of something. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you here,
No,
but
go ahead.
gosh, you were so right. So if for the listener, when you put a house under contract, it doesn't mean you have to buy it, right? You still have
That's
that
right.
DD period. But the biggest fear is just getting that contract. That's what stops people. They don't even get the contract. But
Yeah,
really, there's zero risk. As long as you're working with a broker that understands how to keep earnest money safe, there's no risk.
that's right.
So it was like a little light bulb listening to what you said that I just wanted to get that out. So I'm sorry to interrupt you, Billy.
I don't know, but yeah, you're absolutely right. Is that with a contract there is no risk really just to get under contract. A lot of people are like, well, I don't want to waste your time. I was like, well, it's okay. You're new at this. I understand. Like, I don't mind working with you. We'll get through this. Make sure you call me whenever you're having doubts, whatever, and let's talk through it. Let's talk about it. Another thing that I learned, and I'll mention that first house was a major rehab project, and we didn't know any better. As I'll say, manage your contractors, and whenever they're not doing what they said they were going to do, go ahead and tell them to go ahead and pack up their stuff and leave. That first one, I had a tradesman who told me his work would be done in 10 days. Naive me believed him, but I went ahead and gave him, I think, 15 days. So it'll be 2 business weeks. I gave him a third business week. And then I got other stuff scheduled to come in behind him. Lo and behold, he didn't do it. It took him over 30 days to do his 10-day job. And I just kind of hung out and I was like, all right, I believe you. I know you left my job to go work somewhere else. I believe you're going to come back and you're trying your best. And I was obviously not a priority. I did end up eventually letting that contractor go and getting a replacement in. But in the meantime, he caused all kinds of delays. The crews that I had set up that I had been referred to uh, all had other things scheduled, and so I couldn't get my preferred crews. It was just, if I had just go ahead and cut the cord from that guy right whenever I started to notice the red flags instead of trying to be nice and be hopeful, I could have saved myself a lot of pain and heartache, and maybe I wouldn't have had those thoughts at the end of that rehab about never doing it again. But
Welcome
it's
to
a
the
hard thing to
business,
do, but
Billy.
you gotta manage those. Yeah, that's right.
We
But you gotta,
all struggle with this piece.
yeah, and it's hard, because it feels very personal. But in the end, I mean, from my perspective, it was me being mean to this guy. He was just trying his best, and I'm just being this greedy real estate investor. But really, what it was he just didn't care about my money. I mean, he was costing me money. He didn't care about my project finishing at all, apparently. But you just got to take ownership of that investment, and if he's not taking ownership of his part of the job, then you got to let him go, and you got to get somebody in there who will.
Yep.
But just, I mean, you got to do it. It's kind of painful and awkward, but once you do it once or twice, you'll start realizing who the good people you can hire are, and it becomes a lot easier. But you also get rid of these bad ones. You don't have to worry about them ever again.
Yeah. So the harsh lesson here, Billy, is that you let emotion control your decision making in a business decision environment.
Absolutely, absolutely correct.
Yep. So we all learn that. Successful business owners, the ones that stick around, understand this very well. People who let emotion involved typically go out of business. So there's no longevity
right.
there. So you have to
That's right.
take that emotion out. All right.
Got to do the hard thing.
You have to. I mean, it's your business you're protecting, not your feelings on how someone's going to feel about you, right?
Exactly.
All right. What I'm going to do here, quick, Billy, is go through my notes that I took down while we were having this amazing conversation. And then I want you to just tell me if I'm missing anything else you want to get in there. And then one final piece of advice for new real estate investors, and then your contact information. So here we go. Real estate, you chose to invest in real estate because you wanted control. And you actually said control multiple times throughout this conversation. Commercial loans are more flexible. So there's advantages and disadvantages to a conventional product to a commercial. Conventional is going to be cheaper and fixed rate for a long time. Commercial is more flexible. You can get more loan options that way. Front end DD I wrote down, and that's just, you were just talking about how to get in with little or no money down. As long as you understand all the numbers and everything going into the deal, you can accomplish that. So it's all about the deal structure.
Right.
Owning your own business gives you control. So not only investing in real estate on the investment side gives you control, but owning a business gives you control over your finances and life, honestly. Advantages to being an agent. I thought you were going to go through a whole bunch, but I only wrote down 2 here. You said the speed, that was your main advantage. You could get into the deal quickly because you have access to the information, but also that you could help others and generate a little commission as well. Be very careful with vacancies because vacancies can kill cash flow and can kill your business. Are you happy? What did I put down here? Oh, I put, are you happy with the first one? I wanted to ask you that. So that's not my notes. That's what I wanted to ask you later. And I did ask you, and you're very happy you kept that very first one.
That's right.
It's hard to retire on cash flow from rental properties, but rental properties will create wealth. A perfect example is your first one. You're into it for 65, you could sell it for 140 right now. So that took a little while to get to that point. But if you have enough of those and they're all going that direction, eventually you're going to have a pretty hefty net worth, and then you can start selling them off. And that's how you really realize your profits.
Yeah.
What's the worst thing that could happen? I wrote down, that's just talking about like trying to overcome your fear. Be cautious, but not too cautious is what your quote would be. Find real estate investment associations. So that's really going to be how to get with the right people. You want to surround yourself with the right team, the right group, the right tribe, but also the education. So you can mitigate risk with education, you said. And then finally, get good at managing contractors. Don't be afraid to fire. In fact, I interviewed somebody once, Billy. I thought this was kind of harsh, but he says, I think you should just hire one that you know you're going to fire. Because until you fire your first contractor, you're not going to be successful. So he's like, just hire one to fire him. And that sounded crazy, but I could kind of understand. So how did I do?
Yeah, I can see where he's coming from.
Anything I missed there, or anything you want to add?
No, I don't think so. That's pretty good notes.
All right, Billy. So tell me one final piece of advice. If I was a brand new real estate investor, we already talked about overcoming the fear. Like, tell me what's one final piece of advice?
Beware of your ego. You're not going to have all the answers. You probably never are. Whenever you don't understand something, ask the question. Don't be afraid to ask a contractor what they mean by this, or ask your real estate agent, what do you mean by this? What does this term mean? Ask the questions, be aware of that ego. And by the same token, be aware of others' ego. So, you can hear an investor on a podcast say they own 15,000 doors. Well, you have to understand what that really means. That means they're part of a group probably that owns 15,000 doors. So if I invest in a REIT, can I say that I own all these doors that these REITs have invested in? Probably not. That'd be deceptive. So just be aware of others' ego as well as your own, and just realize that we're all just trying to make it. We're all doing our best.
I love it. That's a very good final piece of advice there, Billy. So tell me, how do we get a hold of you?
You can find me on Instagram at Another Flippin' Couple. There's a profile picture of me and my wife that I'm very proud of. And then I'm on Bigger Pockets as well, just Billy Daniel at Bigger Pockets in Russellville, Arkansas. And then of course we mentioned trainwithebi.com. I would love to hear some feedback. So if you have somebody who logs onto that website, they can message me on Instagram and say this is amazing or this is awful. But I'd ask you just give us some constructive feedback. If it's awful, that's fine. Just let me know why so I can fix it.
Yeah, that's great. All right, trainwithebi.com. Well, Billy, you have lots of different things you could be doing. In fact, you booked this while you're in the car on the interstate. You threw that thing in park and scheduled this with me today. Really appreciate your 45 or so minutes here we had together. So thank you. For the listener, there's lots of different podcasts you could be listening to. And Billy says you have to get educated to overcome that fear. Podcast is a fantastic way to do that, which we didn't actually mention, but thank you for choosing the Real Estate Educators podcast instead of any of those other ones that you could be listening to right now. If you enjoyed the conversation we had today, please 5-star review, share it with a friend. And with that, I hope you make this day a great one. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. If you did, please be sure to follow and leave us a review. Oh yeah, and tell a friend.